So not too long ago I got first place in a 487 players regional going 9-0 with WhiteBeard. I do think WhiteBeard has been an underrated deck ever since OPO5. I'm not saying it's a top tier deck, but if you look at the results of the OPSI 6 regionals, so far there were 2 top 32 from England, 1 top 8 from Latin America, and just last weekend another top 8 from America, which is pretty impressive in my opinion for such an underrepresented leader. This is the list that I got first place with. I think this is a pretty standard list, however I don't think this list is finalized and I think some changes can be made. I decided to run 8 searchers, 4 Nami and 4 Ezo. This is different from my top 16 nationals list in which I swapped the Ezos to 2k counters because realistically you only have time to put down 1 to 2 searches in a game. But I realized that having a searcher in turn 1 is just so important to make sure you can attack twice on turn 2, and also 1k and 2k counters don't make a difference a lot of times, as your opponent is just going to attack you for 6k anyway. So having 8 searchers allows me to see 1 in my opening hand more consistently. Makino is a must if you're running 8 searchers, but even if I only run 4 searchers, I would still run this. This is especially good against Katakuri, as most of the time they won't be able to clear a standing searcher on your board, so having that extra character to attack is just so important against Katakuri's last trigger. Sanji is the best Straw Hat 2k counter in my opinion. A lot of people think this is just a 2k counter and is unplayable as a character, but I've actually played it a lot of times against Katakuri. So if you're going second, you play this on turn 1. Turn 2 you drop a 4 costs and attack with Sanji for 7k. I don't run 4 costs vanilla anymore, so I don't play Sanji as often now. Jozu is the only 2k counter for WhiteBeard pirates, and the rush effect can be really useful. Even if I don't play Ezo, I would still want to run this. Guardpoint, the second best counter card for red. I'm actually considering cutting this down to 2, as having too many can brick your hand when you drop 9 costs WhiteBeard. One of the losing conditions for WhiteBeard is bricking with cards with 0 counter, so Bad Manners Kick Course helps. I run 1 only because I just hate seeing 2 of this in my hand, or when your opponent is spamming you with 6k attacks. Also, don't forget how useful the trigger can be. Good players will play around on curve ace, so a lot of times I just use this to minus 3k on their Sabo or Borsalino to prevent them from blocking with counter. Rush Sanji is a great card to play on curve, to play around 7 cost Borsalino against Sakazuki, or just a good card to see when you don't see your other rush cards. Robin is purely for Rebecca blocker but is also good against Perona. She can also KO Shiraya and Uta when you combine with ace. 5 costs Marco is here in case you don't see your rush Luffy. This is better than 4 costs vanilla due to Moria and stage Sakazuki, and I think this is better than 5 costs vanilla because of Moria. Combo this with Otama to get rid of Kuzan. To be honest, 4 cost blockers are pretty terrible in this meta, as every deck has answers to deal with this card. But you can still play around Amaru by leaving Katakuri on 2 life. They don't run Thunderbolt anymore, so they can't do the Thunderbolt Amaru combo. Most Katakuri only run 2 to 3 Amaru nowadays, so dropping 2 blocker Marco should be safe. Moria needs to commit 3 Dons to KO 1 Marco with Great Eruption Absalom, so essentially this can be a 4 Dons 3k counter. Dropping 2 of these would make sure Moria can't kill you, as they will need to commit at least 8 Dons to remove 2. WhiteBeard is just too important in all the matchups besides Katakuri. A lot of people think you need to be on 1 to 2 life to drop this, but it's totally fine to drop this when you're on 0 life, as long as you don't die. By playing the 9 cost WhiteBeard, it pretty much means that your opponent's 6k and below characters cannot attack for 1 turn. You only have time to play 1 to 2 of this, so that's why I'm running 3 only, to prevent bricking. Izo can usually fetch you 1 anyway. There are also cards that are worth considering, so let's go through them briefly. To be honest, Rush Zoro is pretty good as a finisher. I played this in my Nats list. It's just so good to be able to play down a Rush character for so cheap. I also lost my top 16 game because I bricked with like 2 Zoro, 2 Luffy, and 2 Ace in my hand, and that's why I took it out. 4 cost characters are really bad in this meta because of how Moria and Sakazuki can remove it so easily. It's still really good against yellow, especially going second. Otama is great to combine with 5 cost Marco to remove Kuzan and Shiraya. Now we have gone through the deck, let's move on to the matchups. Against Red Purple Law, when there's a Shiraya on the board, before you drop your 9 cost WhiteBeard, attack with leader for 6k first. He will most likely drop a 2k counter or take life. If you drop your WhiteBeard first, he will definitely block plus a 1k counter. Also remember that you can use Ace and Robin to KO-ish Shiraya. Other than Shiraya and Blocker Law, it shouldn't be a hard matchup, especially when you have your 9 cost WhiteBeard. Red Purple Law is full of 5k characters and they have very little Dons to play with. In my opinion, this is a 50-50 matchup if the Sakazuki player is good, and if they don't play Pudding, that is. Thankfully, most Sakazuki players don't play Pudding. Against Sakazuki, you would want to play out your rush characters as you want to get the value before they can remove it. A lot of Sakazuki players like to play Rebecca before the turn we play out 9-cost Whitebeard. If you're on 9 Dons with 2 life, don't be afraid to play Robin and a rush character to push for damage instead. Against Moria on your rush ace turn, it is very tempting to clear your opponent's board, but it's usually better to just go for life. This is because next turn you will drop your 9-cost Whitebeard and will make Moria's 5k characters basically useless. So the trade-off is you have to take 2 small attacks from your opponent, but you get to attack your opponent's life twice, which is well worth it in my opinion, as it means you can end the game a turn sooner, and a lot of times they will choose to drop 8-cost Moria, so they won't have spare Dons to attach to their 5k characters to attack anyway. Against Katakuri you would want to take every life and go down to 0 before your opponent can drop their 7-cost Big Mom. This is probably the only matchup that 9-cost Whitebeard is not important. This used to be a really good matchup because of blockers, but now I think it's challenging due to Amaru and Reject. Most lists only run 2 to 3 Amaru though, so dropping 2 blocker Marco on your final turn is usually safe. Yamato shouldn't be too difficult, but watch out for Hody Jones, which can rest 2 of your Dons to prevent you from using counter events. You might also want to save Ace if they run 8-cost Kid. Playing Rush Zoro on 3 or 4 Dons turn is very good against Yamato because it forces the Yamato leader to attack it instead of your leader. Perona isn't difficult either, you just need to rush them down so it's too late for them to drop 10-cost Doflamingo. Reiju is a difficult matchup because of the amount of 2k counters and draws they have, and Pudding of course. Don't let them to have time to drop Judge, just go for life unless you can ace an Ichiji. I believe many people underestimate Whitebeard and think the deck is autopilot. I agree that the deck is not difficult, but one misplay can cost you a counter which will ultimately cost you the whole game. There's so much I can talk about, such as when to take life, bluffing, and how to play around Pudding. But I don't want this video to drag on for too long, so I will make a separate video for it. Thank you for watching and see you next time.